Now, tomorrow is the last day of campaigning to become the MP for Brent East in London. It's been a year and a half since the last by-election, and this constituency, which gave Ken Livingstone to Parliament, ought to be a shoo-in for Labour. Yet big cheeses in the party are going around suggesting it could be the place to break the almost unprecedented run of by-election successes of this government. No by-election is complete without the presence of Michael Crick. We asked him to find out what was going on.
Kilburn and Willesden, Dollis Hill and Neasden, a string of famous stations, long objects of fun for satirists. Westminster's just 8 stops down the Jubilee line as Brent East stages the first by-election in 581 days, the longest spell in modern times we've had no elections for a Westminster seat. And after such a long gap and the turmoil of war, this test of opinion holds a special interest, at least further down the line, if not here perhaps.
I've always been staunch Labour, to be honest. My parents are and everything, but they have lied.
I would support the Labour Party, but there's a trust thing going on that I've got to worry about now.
Tony Blair's probably the best man we got for the job. Do you know what I mean? I look at him like a managing director or something like that.
Our first stop, a retirement home, with the Tory candidate Uma Fernandez and Michael Howard. They seemed among friends. Sort of.
It's about time we had a change of government.
We need a Margaret Thatcher, don't we?
We need Margaret Thatcher back in and get Margaret Thatcher. Oh, Baroness.
Baroness.
That's her correct title.
Baroness.
Get her back in
She
again.
was fantastic, wasn't she? The only man in the cabinet.
Yeah.
Yet, strangely, Mr. Howard got upset.
Are we on air now?
Yeah.
Well, let's not be for a moment.
OK, right. If we spoke to residents, he said, we must leave. So we did. The Tories said we'd broken their rules not to speak to people, but we never agreed any such rules. What does an experienced politician like you agreeing to rules, if indeed you did, that we can't talk to voters? I mean, what are you frightened these people might say?
I'm not frightened at all of what they say, but...
Well, what was the problem then about talking to them? They wanted to talk to us.
You should have you promised you'd keep to the rules.
Well,
and
we didn't actually. We didn't actually.
So
what's an experienced politician? But isn't this all rather control freakery, what you accuse Labour of? The Tory campaigns had other mishaps too, like misspelling Willesden with only one E on the posters. When we tried to phone the woman responsible, the local campaign director Sue Ben Bassett, her message said she's away until 4 days after polling.
You have reached Lib Dem early campaign director for London Western. I'm away on holiday until Monday the 22nd of September.
From second place last time, the Tories now risk coming third, despite the tactic of printing pictures of the Labour contender's smart home in what they call Millionaires' Row in Weybridge, Surrey. I mean, do you think that's the right way to campaign, showing people's homes?
Well, I think you may notice the salient feature of this very splendid home, which I do indicate to your viewers, is that it is not in Brent.
Isn't it pretty hypocritical? I mean, your homes are probably worth more combined. What, your home in Kennington Lane and your home in the old dairy, that's, you bought that for what, 430,000? Your home in Kennington Lane is probably worth about 800,000. They're worth more than £1 million. Isn't it pretty hypocritical for your party to be attacking the Labour candidate for living in Millionaires' Row?
But you see, the electors of West Dorset have the knowledge that the place that I live is in West Dorset, and when I'm not there, I'm in Westminster, or very close to it in Kennington.
But your people here are attacking the Labour candidate for living in a wealthy area.
Nothing wrong with living in a wealthy area. You're most welcome to live in a wealthy area, and as I say, a most estimable house, which I had it myself.
But I mean, you're attacking for living in Millionaires' Row.
The problem is that it's not in Brent.
This is a fight where each main contenders tried to show they're the most local.
Primary colours.
Lib Dem leader Charles Kennedy's been here not 4, not 5, but 7 times now, backing Sarah Tether, who, at 29, would become the baby of the Commons if elected, the youngest MP. Lib Dem workers say they've put out almost 900,000 leaflets so far. That's roughly 30 per household. in 300 different editions, proudly displayed on the wall. The funny thing about all these hundreds of leaflets on the wall is that very few of them give any biographical details of the Lib Dem candidate. This one here is an odd exception. So what does it tell us about Sarah Tether? Well, that she works for a cancer care charity in London. She's 29, and that's about it, apart from the phrase that she's an experienced local campaigner. Nothing about her being a councillor in Islington or being the Lib Dem candidate for the Greater London Assembly elections in Waltham Forest, Islington and Hackney. So the Lib Dems have done their very best to keep from Brent voters the fact that their candidate is also a local campaigner in 4 other London boroughs. All these leaflets here, you read them all. We've got, what, 24 of them? Yeah. They all say, you know, local. They all say local campaigner. Well, that's a bit misleading, isn't it? She's not local.
What does this scene look like? A local campaign?
Well, yes, but she's only a local campaign in terms of the by-election. She's from Islington, and you leave it off all your leaflets.
I'm from the Highlands of Scotland. Islington is but a stone's throw away.
And they claim the Labour man backed Tony Blair on the Iraq War, when really he had strong doubts.
The fact that the Labour candidate is willing to endorse Labour policies means that it's perfectly reasonable to point out that by implication, a vote for Labour is a vote for what Tony Blair is doing.
It's misleading though, because he did express reservations and scepticism about the war.
You bet.
And he was as sceptical about the war as indeed you've been.
Well, if he's that sceptical, why is he representing the interests of the Labour Party? Because the Labour Party represents the case that they are prosecuting in the aftermath of this war.
Testing views in Brent East isn't easy. Many people are foreigners who can't vote or don't speak English.
Excuse me, no, I understand.
OK. But there's clearly significant disenchantment with Labour.
Definitely not Labour.
Why that? Why's that? Do you normally vote Labour?
Like an idiot, at the last election I did, but I decided not to this time.
Why?
Because I don't like Labour's policies now.
In particular?
Going to war in Iraq.
And who do you normally vote for?
Labour.
And what makes you think maybe Lib Dems might be better this time?
I think their policies and asylum seekers and that are better.
I always voted Labour. I would never vote anyone else until Tony Blair came in the scene. And the very minute that I saw Tony Blair, I wouldn't even vote. I vote now Conservative. I don't like voting Conservative, but I don't lose my vote. But I'd die before I'd vote for Tony Blair.
But strangely, if one visits Labour's campaign HQ, there's virtually no mention of Tony Blair. The man who was once such a great asset has almost become a non-person, airbrushed out. The sole mentions of Mr. Blair on candidate Robert Evans' literature or website, so far as we could find, were in tributes to the previous MP who died. I was also intrigued to pick up a leaflet promoting an anti-yob hotline. I couldn't resist. When I rang, though, the anti-yob hotline was answered as Robert Evans' campaign headquarters. Oh, I thought that was the anti-yob hotline. Clearly not. Well, I just wanted to know what you're going to be doing about these yobs around here. Have you been getting many calls on this hotline? You haven't? Not at all? Have you had any? No? I'm the first. Blimey, I would have thought there'd be quite a lot. And, well, do you have a telephone number for the local police station by any chance, so I can contact them? Actually, they didn't. So much for cracking down on yobs. Yesterday, David Blunkett was around, not helping Labour's campaign, with his admission that the Lib Dems were now neck and neck. So, what did the Home Secretary make of the anti-yob hotline? It's a bit strange, isn't it? When we rang the hotline, we were the first call they'd had. And they didn't even have a number for the police.
Well, I'm very glad you were responsible enough to ring, and I hope we sorted out the thuggery of the BBC.
But it shows it's not that popular, this hotline. And furthermore, when we asked for the local police station, they didn't have it.
It may actually show that thanks to the investment of the Labour Party and the extra policing and the community support officers and the street neighbourhood wardens, crime has actually genuinely been reduced, and so has the fear of crime.
Other Labour leaflets also puzzled us. One proudly claimed 2,000 more jobs in Brent East. But when we rang the government's Office of National Statistics, they said no such figure existed. Labour then explained they based the 2,000 extra jobs on the fall in benefit claimants. But that's not the same thing at all, say Whitehall number crunchers. Well, you can't make that assumption. I mean, look at last June, July this year. Nationally, 213,000 people left the claimant register. Only 90,000 of them have got work. You can't necessarily assume that because there are 2,000 fewer people claiming benefit, that there are 2,000 more jobs.
Well, I think what we can say is that those who are on the unemployment register are far fewer than they were in 1997.
Well, shouldn't your leaflet say that?
The New Deal, well, to be honest, Michael, we're trying to get a message across that
In
the
other words,
the government's economic...
You're massaging the figure then, aren't you? Massaging the message. Spinning it, I suppose, is the word. God forbid that I should say. But
I don't think we're massaging the figure at all. I think what we're saying is that Gordon Brown has produced economic stability.
Another inaccurate leaflet claimed an extra 110 teachers in Brent. But when we checked with the local council, they said the number was in fact 305. Labour can't even get it right when they get it right. The astonishing thing is how Tony Blair has now gone a record 6.5 years without losing a seat in a by-election. But don't be surprised this Thursday to see a low turnout and Labour abstentions help the Lib Dems end that record.
That was Michael Crick. Well, altogether there are 16 candidates standing in the Brent East by-election, which takes place the day after tomorrow. Polling, that is therefore this Thursday, the 18th of September.